Thomas leaned back in his rickety office chair once more, the creaking of which echoing in the expansive interview chamber he found himself in today. He tentatively fumbled his hand across the table before him until his fingers caught hold of his Mad Genius print coffee mug. He thought to himself, how did today end up like this, as he took a drawn-out sip from the swirling dark brew. Across from Thomas sat a being he had come to know as a Coriolan, or to his impolite description, a big-ass frog bat, and by name Wavu of Laws. She had politely allowed him access to a coffee machine and a food printer before beginning their interview, though if the strained look on her face could be used as an indicator, he was pushing her patience thin. Were he not confined to the building he was in due to a political shitstorm, he might have been more respectful towards her. Well, there's no changing the past now. Leaning forward once more, he placed the mug aside and cleared his throat. Sorry for making you wait, ma'am. I hope you can understand just how tired I must be after pulling an all-nighter just to be called in here after a short nap. He gave her his best don't hate me smile. Wavu blinked, then simply returned the awkward expression as best as she could. No worries, sir. You've only taken up 2 hours of my time. Her amphibian eyes bored into his own with a silent and cold malice. Adjusting his posture, he replied in a half mumble, Again, sorry, I just needed a wake-up, that's all. He laid both of his hands on the table and straightened himself in his seat. We can start now, ma'am. Without breaking eye contact, she reached into a case lying to her side and retrieved a small stack of folders and a hollow projector. Very well, Mr. Thomas Lowell, former member of Operation Flanking the Ox, current lead designer of the Jubilee weapon system, I hereby invoke the right of justifiable honesty and information integrity. As per the laws of governance, you are to swear an oath of honesty and integrity for the sake of this interview. Any information you claim to be true that is found to be false will be used against you in a multi-species court of law. Penalties for providing misinformation may incur a sentence of 20 to 30 solar rotations within penal colony, A 10,461, a fee of no less than 10 million United credits, and demeritment and social outcasting per your release. She said all of this without so much as blinking or stopping for air. After a brief pause, she asked, Do you hereby swear to give all answers willingly and honestly, Mr. Thomas Lowell? Thomas gulped before he practically blurted out, Yes, Miss Wavu of Law, ma'am. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. He could practically feel the sweat beating on his forehead. 30 years in prison was a terrible enough sentence, and public outcasting was brutal enough. But 10 million bucks? That's more than a decade of wages, and if he didn't pay them off in his own lifetime, they'd go after his family instead. A stern look crossed the frog-like features of the interviewer. Vows beholden to gods or other deities are a moot point, Mr. Lowell. However, I understand the intent behind your words. She spread the folders before her out in a wide arc, whilst opening the last one with a mere flick of her wrist. The icy glare she had settled into seemed to fade as she resumed speaking, this time towards the wall to her side. Beginning interview. Start recording. A click sounded from the wall, followed by a slight rattle as multiple cameras began to take form around the room. Every corner and wall had at least one device designed to capture and record audio or visual data. Thomas instinctually glanced around the room, counting no less than a dozen new additions to the room. Wavu skimmed over the documents before her. Although Thomas did not know it at the time, Wavu herself had no idea why she was called in so early either. She had been taking her regular early morning mineral soak when her own boss had called her. She had to glide over to the office on nothing but a hastily reheated burrito and a cup of poorly steeped tea. If anything, she was the one who was tired and irritable, though she refused to allow her professionalism to be compromised. She looked back to Thomas, who had ceased inspecting the new additions to the chamber and was now patiently waiting on her. A subtle croak, an analog to clearing her throat, and she spoke. Mr. Lowell, formerly known as Engineer Lowell of the Terran Navy, let us begin this interview with our first document here. From what I have read so far, you were a pivotal member on board Galactic Trade Syndicate vessel Uranium Unicorn. She took a moment to reread the name, then resumed. From accounts of the captain, as well as numerous fellow officers, it was from your efforts that the GTS Uranium Unicorn was able to survive a cataclysmic gravity drive failure during the interdiction of smuggler activity in the P-51 sector. Is this correct? Thomas nodded with a curt, "Yes, ma'am, that is correct." I ask that you elaborate further. Explain the situation as it unfolded in your subsequent actions. She laid both elbows on the table while making an arch of her intertwined fingers. Thomas took a moment to scratch at his mustache as he recalled. The campaign flanking the Ox was, in essence, the biggest anti-pirate raid conducted to date. Unicorn was the left vanguard leader, as we intercepted a roaming fleet that had recently raided our decoy ship in Sector P-49, just outside of the Wrigley system. Our aim was to cripple them and discern the location of their headquarters. It was... A subtle shift came over him as the memories finally came back to him in full. It was a shit show. We intercepted them during one of their recharge cycles on their warp drive. We had a slight advantage over them, given we had a handful more ships and we got the jump on them. But even so, it all went to hell. Every time we sank one, they'd fire up their engines and try a kamikaze run on us, or they'd put themselves in the line of fire for their pals, or they'd unload all of their guns as they slowly melted to slag. They were mainly Bortians, so it was just in their nature to die for their brothers. We knew they would, but that doesn't change how it went. A sip of bitter coffee spurred him to continue. The Unicorn had been doing great so far. 6 ships down, 2 more in her sights, and shields were still in the green. But like I said, these guys had decided that the only way out was through the void. Those 2 ships we were hitting decided a tag-team nuclear blast was how they wanted to go. Unicorn was built like a heavyweight champion. All firepower, not much mobility. When they got close enough, they went fissile, and the Unicorn systems were all but fried. I was maintaining our gravity generator at the time. All of the lights were flickering, the PA screaming out garbled nonsense, and the hull shook like a 5.0 earthquake. I held onto the control panel as if my life depended on it, and I knew at the time that it did. We went 0G when the main power cut, so I tried like hell to get us some footing. That's when I noticed it. Thomas put his hands in the air, making a rippling gesture with his hands. There were these waves on the display and a series of numbers and readouts that didn't make sense. At the time, I just assumed the system had gone haywire, so I fought to get everything back under control. Full system reset, realign the couplers manually, and get us back to standard 3Gs. I can only call it luck that the data recorder survived all that. Wavu reached into her jacket pocket and retrieved a small notepad, on which she jotted down some aspect of his story she found of note. The reports here claim that you managed the situation well enough to where you could abandon your post in favor of joining the crew that tasked themselves with the repairs of the shield generator. Tell me how the rest of this engagement played out for you. As you said, I got the gravity stable enough and set it to a locked frequency so I could help other repair crews. It might not be listed on the reports, but I also stopped by the life support bay and the communication hub while in transit to the shields. From what I recall, we were knocked out of the fight for a half hour or so before we were back to combat readiness. But by that time, the GTS Greater Rockhammer had already come to our aid and drove off all nearby hostile vessels. From there, it was just a sweep-up job, then a return order due to our ship having no port or starboard side weapons operational. As far as his account goes, it matches the file before the interviewer. What wasn't mentioned was the anomalous waves he mentioned. She closed the first folder and took hold of the second, and like before, skimmed it while Thomas finished his coffee. She blinked a few times as she read the next few pages. After the conclusion of that operation, were you involved in any other military operations before transferring to the Anvil Labs? I see a few months of time in between these reports. Thomas fidgeted for a moment. He remembered damn well what had happened after the Unicorn went into dry dock. No, I was put on mandatory leave due to my brother's death. He was on board a different ship during that same raid. GTS Volcano Blood was lost to coil gun fire. He took a deep breath, trying not to dwell on those memories. I was put on 2 months shore leave to visit home, then assigned to dock work and ship repair while the transfer was approved. More notes were jotted down. She sympathized with him, but the interview was her priority. I see. It says here that you were first sent onto a project for a new stealth fighter, but when another team got a hold of the recorder from the gravity generator, you were requested to switch projects. Why was that? For lack of a better explanation, they wanted to have me attempt to replicate those waves I had seen before. The stealth fighter already had a full crew to piece it together, and the guys running the grav lab were bored. He couldn't place it, but something about this line of questioning seemed quite leading. Mavu's eyes flicked back to the page again before settling on the holopad. She seized the device gently as she spoke. These others who worked alongside you on this gravity-based project, did they ever disclose the nature of this project? Thomas remained silent. He couldn't say anything. His oath would not be broken. Mr. Lowell, I have been granted permission to ask these questions. She activated the projector, which then displayed a message bearing the Galactic Trade Syndicate emblem and a bold print line below it. Level 5. Access granted. Seeing this, he let out a long sigh. Understood. With a squawk from the old wheel of his chair, he pulled himself close to the table. His previously timid and nervous demeanor evaporated, leaving behind a grim scowl. If I understand correctly, you have before you a rough outline of the Maelstrom tests. He waited for her to confirm, his eyes never leaving the table. Those irregular readings that I saw on the Unicorn were something we hadn't seen before. Something about a failing warp drive in a nuclear blast passing through a high-density shield caused a new energy signature to be detected. This energy was unique since it could only be detected by our gravity generator's sensors. We found a way to replicate it, adjust it, and test it. We tried everything with it, lifting things, crushing things, heating objects without touching them, turning bricks into sand, making water flow in reverse. We realized what it was and what it could do. Then, by some miracle, we figured out how to aim it. His eyes locked with Mavu's. She had opened up the last folder, and he could clearly see the rough schematics of their creation. He reached over and tapped the page before her. That is the fruit of our labor. Upon his gesturing, she handed him the page. He eyed it with a mix of pride and weariness. Gravity Control Apparatus V01, or the Gravity Gun if you're not a stickler. Designed and built by Anvil Labs, conceptualized and prototyped by one lead engineer Thomas Lowell. His finger ran across his faded signature at the bottom of the page. I made the first one. Got to test it too. The page slowly slid across the table, back to the waiting hands of the now wary-eyed Chorlon interviewer. The lab boys didn't need to inform me of anything. I was the one making it work. Mavu looked over the design herself. It was a clunky thing. Large blocky components jutting from the exposed inner workings, a rugged handle and foregrip made from a roughly modified carbine body, and an exposed power supply hanging from a sling. She herself had almost no experience with weapons of any kind, but this thing looked unwieldy even to her untrained eyes. Once again clearing her throat, Mavu continued with the interview. Your explanation is both sufficient and answers my next question. Thomas cocked an eyebrow. What do you mean? I was going to ask for the name of the individual responsible for this contraption's creation. I have orders to discern the capabilities of these weapons. A smirk crept across his lips. Is that all? I am more than capable of detailing that. Ask what you want to know. Mavu quickly flips her notepad to a fresh page, her pen dancing across the paper as she writes out her questions and answers. What kind of weapon is a gravity gun? I would describe it as less of a weapon and more of a tool. Skipping all of the science mumbo-jumbo, it works by grabbing a chunk of matter in front of it, compressing a space around the target into a compacted ball, and pulling the ball towards it. What range can the device operate at? It depends on the size of the device and the power it can draw. The prototype could only grab things a few meters away, but a few of the later iterations could reach a kilometer. How big of a space can it compact? That depends on range, power supply, and the size of the focus array. The smallest we could manage was a sphere of about 6 centimeters, but the largest a handheld version could muster was a perfect 3.14 meters. You mentioned iterations and versions of the weapon. What kind of weapons have been made? The smallest version was about the size of a pistol. It has practically no range. and was actually made to be a kind of tumor removal device. The largest one I've seen was mounted on board a destroyer. I didn't personally work on anything larger than the rifle, so I can only guess that it was an anti-ship weapon made for long range. If I had to guess, there are probably larger versions in production. We also made some specialized types like sniper or anti-material rifle style devices. The sniper was the one that could reach a kilometer, and the anti-material rifle was capable of short-range, large radius effect attacks. Mavu had to take a while to jot all of that down, but pressed on once she had caught up. What else are these devices capable of? Thomas scratched at his chin momentarily. Aside from tearing off chunks of armor or crushing tumors, I've seen some places use one as a mining tool to sort of crush the rocks without compacting them too much. One lab has been using them to make ultra-compacted starship armor. Some peacekeeper units have been equipped with a low-power design that is capable of incapacitating suspects without causing damage. Like I said, it's more of a tool than a weapon. Mavu was about to speak when Thomas piped up. "Oh, I almost forgot to mention the depth function. It is possible to set the gravity gun to penetrate a certain distance into an object before compacting. This made it possible for the weapon to hit a target directly while ignoring armor." A rumbling sigh escaped the frog-like woman. "That is exactly why we have been having this conversation." The confused look the human gave her prompted her to elaborate. The GTS has put an official ban on the use of gravity guns. They had seized a number of them from the Terran Marines, found them to be overly cruel, and banned them from being used as infantry weapons. Thomas nodded along to her words. "Yeah, I can see that happening. I was supposed to interview you, find out who designed these damn things, and have them sign a license restriction form." She reached once more into her briefcase. This time her hand held a red form. She watched nervously as Thomas read over the form. "So, by signing this form, I'm giving up all inventive rights to the gravity gun, allowing the government to ban the use of them, and halt all production lines making them, as well as forfeiting all proceeds or payments you have ever received from the sale of manufacturing of these items." In Mavu's mind, she knew he would never accept these terms. Nobody ever did, as it was akin to economic suicide. Thomas tapped his chin thoughtfully. Yeah, I can do that." Mavu had to take a double take. Excuse me? I said that I'll sign it. Give me the pen and I'll give it my John Hancock." As confused as she was, she complied and gave him a pen from her jacket pocket. "I don't think I've ever heard of someone willingly signing one of these. May I ask why?" Shrugging, he began signing the multiple lines of legal prose. "I never really got anything out of it. Most they ever gave me was a celebratory night at the pub, but I wasn't getting any money." "Why would you make it then, if you didn't stand to gain anything?" "I didn't make it because I wanted money. Not even the allure of fame or power had any pull for me. I just wanted to be a part of it." He finished the last line of the page and read over the sheet one more time. "I wanted to discover something new and unexplored. I didn't realize it during those moments of weightlessness on board the Unicorn, but I was drawn towards those strange energy readings. I knew I was the first person to ever see that, and I just wanted to delve deeper, know more, see something one of a kind. Getting to make a really neat garbage compactor was just an added bonus to the journey." Mavu took the form from him and read it over. Another question nagged at her, but she wanted to conclude this interview before asking, "I think I understand Mr. Thomas Shannon Lowell." She noticed a slight grimace on his face at the mention of his middle name. "With this form signed and all my questions answered, I conclude this interview." As she said those words, the dozen cameras and microphones crept back into their hidden compartments. Neither had noticed, but the lights at the edge of the room had dimmed while they spoke, and the refreshed lighting made both squint as their eyes adjusted. Thomas stretched at his aching joints. A few noisy pops came from his tired body. "Say, Miss Mavu, would you like to grab some lunch? I'll pay for it, since I did hold you up earlier." Mavu considered it for a moment with crossed arms, a single finger tapping at her sleeve. "There is no need to pay for me, though I would like to join you." In a single motion, she made her wing outstretched and hooked onto the handle of her briefcase, bringing it right by her side. "I would like to ask you one thing before we go." "Sure. What is it?" You didn't seem too upset at the idea of such powerful weapons being made unavailable. Why is that? Thomas grabbed hold of his decaled mug and followed her to the door. I don't remember ever calling them powerful. The damn things are gluttons for power, and the batteries weigh too much. If anything, you're saving us the trouble of getting rid of them ourselves. The phrasing he chose struck Mavu as odd. If the gravity gun isn't powerful, then what is? Thomas shook his head. Trust me, you don't want to know.